Welcome back. All right, so challenge for me today, the 1999 entry draft. A redraft from 1999. I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna try 2000 as well. So 1999, there are 28 picks in the first round because Minnesota and Columbus are a year away from their first draft. The Atlanta Thrashers end up with that number one draft pick. And what would the Atlanta Thrashers do with that number one draft pick? They would grab Patrick Stefan. However, what I should point out here as well is there are 12 names that are on this board. All 12 names that populate this board are players who either didn't play in the NHL or played less than 100 games at the National Hockey League level. So this was a draft that was well known for being a flop. A big part of that being that there were so many first round picks that just didn't make it. So number one, the question that I had for myself, and I've gone back and forth on this, and we'll see how it goes, is, so you can sit Atlanta down and say, all right, you've got hindsight, 2020. Patrick Stefan, don't draft him first. Stefan is not going to become the player that you think he will. So do you advise them to draft Henrik Zetterberg, who's going to be a star player for Detroit and is drafted far later in this draft? Or do you tell them to draft one of the Sedin twins that they're going to be drafting a surefire Hall of Famer? Here's the tricky part. You know Zetterberg's going to be good. He doesn't need anybody else with him to be good. You are not sure whether or not the Sedin twins need each other. And there was at no point during their career a time outside of injury where they played completely separate, as in they were Canucks their whole careers. Yes, they were good separate, but early on in their careers there were some struggles. And I think if I was advising Atlanta in this situation, I think you have to go Zetterberg. I think Henrik Zetterberg has to go number one in the redraft because of the uncertainty of how would it have changed things if the Sedins didn't go through their development and their early years together. How would that have changed them? Maybe they're better players earlier not being together. But the reality is we just don't know. And with Zetterberg, we already know he's not a Hall of Famer at this point. I think it's just a matter of time. But one of the best players in this draft, without question. I think you have Zetterberg go first. That's me. You guys can let me know your thoughts. So that means Vancouver comes out of this draft with Daniel, with Henrik. I feel like I don't need to put the last names. I'm not sure why I'm trying to put a K before the I there. Apologies for that. And I'll have Daniel first and Henrik second. It doesn't matter. The Canucks are drafting both. It really doesn't matter. But yeah, so the Sedin twins still go to Vancouver. Zetterberg goes first to Atlanta. And I was thinking, like, would I take Henrik first? Would I take Daniel first? But the reality is, it just makes sense for it to be Zetterberg. So it's not hating or anything. It just makes sense. Number 4 originally was Pavel Brendel. Pavel Brendel had so much hype behind him. This guy was going to be a star, and it never worked at the NHL level. He wasn't able to get his game to the next level. He was drafted by the Rangers. He ended up playing with Philadelphia as well. It just didn't work. So number 4 on the redraft, Radim Verbata. Radim Verbata, very good forward, nice long career. And for the New York Rangers, getting him at number 4, it does show that the star power in this draft does drop off pretty quickly. This is why I haven't done a 1999 draft. Generally, the drafts I pick are very often the ones that have a lot of stars in them or a lot of steals late in the draft, like Zetterberg is, for instance, in this one. But this draft, it does tend to tail off a bit. Number 5. And you know, it's a tough choice. I'm putting Miller 5th. If you want to put Radim Verbata below Ryan Miller, I'm fine with that. Is that what we're hearing? Is that what... You know what? I'm going to do the unheard of here. Yeah, I'm going to do the unheard of. I see it on the board and I go, nah. And I've gone over this list a few times, but I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to call an audible. I'm going to be really, really careful not to touch the blue of the Pavel Brendel name. Because then, being as particular as I am, I'll demand that I restart the whole video and do another take, and I'd rather not. Yeah, all right. Ryan Miller, then Radim Verbata. No insult to Radim Verbata, but Ryan Miller was an excellent goaltender for a long time. And having him go to the New York Rangers is interesting because it's a year before they draft Henrik Lundqvist. So, I mean, if you'd had Miller and Lundqvist in that system, that would have been impressive for the New York Rangers. But yeah, so I'll go Miller and then I'll go Verbata. Are we in agreement? All right. Or as Chef Ramsay says, agreeance. I think he's making up a word there. Number 6. It's another goaltender going to Nashville. And what's interesting with this one is that originally Nashville does drop the goaltender in this spot. Brian Finley didn't make it. I think he played 6 games at the NHL level, whereas Craig Anderson played a lot more than that. More than 100 times more than that, actually. Craig Anderson, excellent goaltender throughout his career. I'm not moving him above Verbata. Nope, Verbata only drops 1 spot from where I had him initially. If just in case Redeem's watching this, I don't want to make him feel a certain way by moving Anderson above him. I don't want to see somebody falling in a redraft. That'd be weird. So yeah, number 6, Craig Anderson, really good career, excellent goaltender for Ottawa, and kind of inspirational at points in his career as well. Number 7, another forward. So far we do not have a defenseman on the board, and it's Martin Havlat. Very good European forward. Nice, decent career for him. And I guess I could put Verbata down at 7 and Havlat at 6 and Anderson at 5. I'm kidding. Havlat at 7 I think is the right spot. You guys can let me know your thoughts. But personally, that's where I would have him. Number 8. And this is interesting because it's Tim Connolly. Tim Connolly was a first-round draft pick. And in the redraft, he's still a first-round draft pick. Tim Connolly, as I recall, his career was cut short by injury. Otherwise, we'd have some more to talk about with Tim Connolly than what we do here. But good top 6 forward at his peak. And one of the good players from this draft. Number 9. So, I feel bad for Martin Erat. How many Martins do we have now? Just 2. We have 2 Hendricks and 2 Martins. Martin Erat ends up being known as the guy who was traded for Philip Forsberg. And I understand. But Martin Erat had a good career in Nashville. He did. He was a good player. He did not have a fantastic time of it in Washington. I think Nashville traded him at exactly the right time. I'm sure they were ecstatic to get Forsberg in that deal. But Erat, to his credit, also had a good career. So at some point I'll do a career video on Erat, and I'll point out how good player, not necessarily great, but good player. And I have him at number 9 in the redraft. Number 10 in the redraft, a Calder winner, actually. And a defenseman. This is the first defenseman on the board, and that's Barrett Jackman. Barrett Jackman going to the Islanders. So in this redraft, they get Redeem, Verbata, Tim Connolly, and Barrett Jackman. Good GMing there by Mike Milbury. We'll talk about Milbury again, I'm sure, when we talk about 2000. But Verbata, Connolly, Jackman, it's a pretty good move here by the New York Islanders, picking up 2 top 6 forwards and a defenseman who's a top 4 defenseman in Barrett Jackman. Who is remembered for, he won the Calder, right? And then there was a lot of time, worst Calder winner. But he was an excellent defenseman. That first year in St. Louis, man, he was very impressive that first year in St. Louis. So, yeah, Jackman ended up having a hard time living up to that first year the rest of his career, but he was still a very good defenseman at points in time. Number 11, for Calgary, Mike Comrie. Mike Comrie had a career that wasn't as long as anticipated, but he had some very good years there, and the good years he had have caused me to put him at 11th on the redraft. Again, it's just too bad that his career didn't end up being longer at the NHL level, but Comrie still ends up being number 11. Now, number 12, you'll notice Florida originally drafted Dennis Schwidke, who would not play 100 games in the National Hockey League. In the redraft, I have them picking a forward who played for a long time. And this is where redrafts are, to me, it depends on how you're looking at it. So Chris Kelly had a longer career than Mike Comrie. So if you're going with a player who had a longer career and was effective in that career, you take Kelly over Comrie. But if you're looking at where they peaked and how good they were for a certain period of time, you take Comrie. So I'm taking Comrie with Kelly at 12th. But there are times that I do redrafts that I go the other way with it, where I say, all right, this player was around longer and had a good career and I think was more effective for longer. And so it really is just a matter of opinion. Chris Kelly at 12 to the Florida Panthers. Not bad. Now, originally at 13, the Oilers picked Yanni Rita. Yanni Rita would not play 100 games in the National Hockey League. In this redraft, I have them picking a player who I believe is a former captain for the Columbus Blue Jackets, and that's Derek McKenzie. McKenzie, mostly bottom six forward throughout his career, I do believe. I don't think he had a lot of time in top six if he played top six, but he had a decent career, and bottom six forwards and centers are important. He was definitely a bottom six forward and a center. So Derek McKenzie, number 13 on the list. Number 14. Originally drafted by the Islanders, and Taylor Pyatt had some good years. He did. I had really hoped with Taylor Pyatt that he was going to be a mainstay for Vancouver at one point. It just didn't work out. But Taylor Pyatt did have some good years in there. So like I said, we're halfway through the first round, and these are good NHL players. Not necessarily as stellar as some of the other drafts, especially when you get into 2015. But that's 16 years after this one, so that's almost a whole generation separate. Number 15, originally Scott Kelman went to the Phoenix Coyotes in this draft. In this redraft, number 15 goes to another forward, mainly a bottom six forward, and that's Nicholas Hagman. Hagman, good forward. I believe played some international hockey there as well. And so, yeah, we're into the part of the draft where you're going to see some bottom six forwards. You're going to see some defensemen in here as well. It is not as star-studded a second half of a draft as it is for most of the others. Number 16, Carolina drafting at this point, and I have them drafting a Pittsburgh pick. Goes to Carolina in this case, Ryan Malone. Malone was not a player that was, stellar at any point in his career, but he was an effective bottom six forward. Did his job well. Wasn't in the league for an extremely long time. But, right. I think Malone at number 16. And you guys will see as we get through to 28. This is where I'm glad this draft doesn't go to 32. I'm glad the first round ends at 28. Number 17. Defenseman. And I debated about where to put Nick Boynton. Nick Boynton had some good years in there. He was a top four defenseman. I liked him fine in Boston at times. But is his career that long? Not really. A lot of the 99 crew, that's kind of how that works. But Nick Boynton had some good years in there. And my debate with Boynton was as high as 13. I might have been able to argue as high as 12. But the overall numbers, I felt like 17 was probably the right spot for him. Number 18. Goaltender. Going to the Pittsburgh Penguins. And it's Alex Auld. Alex Auld, mostly a backup throughout his career. I think he had 1 year there in Vancouver as the starter. Started out, of course, in Florida. Ended up going back to Florida. I liked Auld. I thought he was a decent goaltender, mostly as a backup, but had some skill there. And I feel that 18 is the right spot. So that's 3 goaltenders now on this board. I think that's it for goaltenders, but let's go ahead and just keep going through this. Number 19, bottom six forward to the Coyotes, Adam Hall. So I have the Coyotes taking Nicholas Hagman and Adam Hall in this draft. Hall played more games than some of the guys I have going ahead of him in the draft. I know that there are people who look at these draft classes and go, well, this guy played longer. And like I said, with Kelly and Comrie, I understand that sentiment. So you can go in that direction if you want. Do your own redraft. It's fun. Redrafts are great. I enjoy redrafts. I do. But yeah, Adam Hall, bottom six forward at 19. At number 20, originally, Barrett Jackman was taken by the Buffalo Sabres. He did not make it to the National Hockey League. And in his place is František Keberle, who I believe was Thomas's brother, wasn't he? So František Keberle, or Frank Keberle, I think he went by in the NHL as well. Defenseman, as I remember. Man, yeah, defenseman as far as I remember. Let me double check on that. This draft, it does thin out. I gotta trust my instincts. He was a defenseman. I knew that. I was like pretty sure, but then I thought, well, am I thinking about Thomas? No, František Keberle was a defenseman and goes 20th overall to Buffalo. 21st to Boston, another defenseman, Jordan Leupold. Jordan Leupold, useful defenseman, bottom 2 for a lot of it. I remember him having some top 4 as well during his time in the NHL, and I felt like 21st was the right spot. I could argue him as high as maybe 18th. But yeah, this draft, it really is kind of interchangeable for me with these players. Number 22, an all-timer. Now, Maxime Ouellet was originally drafted here by Philly. He was a goaltender that it didn't quite work out with. I remember at one point he got brought into Vancouver with this idea that, hey, we're fixing the goaltending. When they talk about the goalie graveyard in Vancouver, a lot of it was under Brian Burke's watch, and a lot of the time it was bringing in guys that you're like, why? And then it just didn't quite work. No offense to Maxime Ouellet, but that it just felt like during that time period there were some bro shoes in there. So for Philadelphia, Tom Kostopoulos. Tom Kostopoulos, bottom 6 forward, played in the NHL for a while. Not a lot in terms of the offensive instincts, but I think he would have fit in Philly's system. And so Tom Kostopoulos goes 22nd. 23rd. Chicago drafts Nicholas Haviland. So yeah, we're into the players now that didn't play that long, and again we're into me looking and saying, well, that defenseman Haviland, he was all right. I'm almost to the point where I want to say, so in the NHL games, these are how these players did. But yeah, Haviland. Now at 24th, the Toronto Maple Leafs originally drafted Lucas Serrata. Didn't work out with Lucas Serrata. In this redraft, drafting 24th, a physical defenseman, as I remember it, Douglas Murray. Wasn't Douglas Murray Swedish too? At any rate, Douglas Murray goes to Toronto in this redraft, a defenseman. Lucas Serrata, as I remember it, was a forward, and it didn't quite work out for him at the NHL level. So Toronto gets an upgrade. Then at 25th, originally, Colorado takes Mikhail Kuleshov. Kuleshov does not play 100 games in the National Hockey League. In this redraft, I have them taking very well-known player now, Mike Commodore. Commodore, 2006 Stanley Cup, of course, with Carolina, right? Commodore played in the NHL, defenseman, physical defenseman, usually bottom 2. Commodore, I was arguing with myself about where to put him in between 22 and 26. I feel like from 22 to 26, you're almost into interchangeable territory. And so Commodore, I think, or 22 to 25. I need to look at which numbers I've got already on the board. 22 to 25 for me, somewhere in there with him. Number 26, another defenseman. Going to Ottawa, Radek Martinek. Or Radek Martinek. It's Radek Martinek. So he goes to Ottawa, another defenseman, mainly depth during his National Hockey League stay, and going 26th. Going 27th to New Jersey. And originally, New Jersey drafted Arya Honan, a goaltender who never ended up playing a game in the NHL. But it was weird to see them drafting a goalie when Marty Brodeur was at his height. And it's Dave Tanabi. It's funny, too, because it's written as Dave Tanabi in here, and I'm like, I remember it as David Tanabi, but Dave Tanabi. Dave is the short form of David anyways. Dave Tanabi, defenseman, not one that played a ton of games at the NHL level, but qualified for the first round. And rounding out the first round, now Christian Kudrock was originally that first round draft pick at 28 for the New York Islanders, did not play 100 games, and in his place, Patrick Stefan. Patrick Stefan did not have the kind of career that he was hoped to have when he was drafted first overall. But he still, in my eyes, was good enough to be number 28 on this board. He did play in the National Hockey League. He did record enough points that I felt like, yeah, Stefan would still end up first round. And so there he is on the board in the first round. 1999 is not an overly easy one because once you get past that first I'd say the first 10. I'd say the top 10's not bad, and you've got some other decent players in here too. But then it really is just splitting hairs once you get into the later parts of that first round. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, hit like and subscribe in the event you may not have done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. I will talk to you again soon.